Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scrutiny Management Board for the 1st of August. I'll start with apologies for absence. I think we have Councillor North and Councillor Irwin and Councillor Carter. Any others?
None. No others received, Chair. Councillor Brown, who was also an invitee, I understand is running late, but will be joining us.
Okay. So we have the minutes of the meeting held on April the 29th, which in your document packs. Is everybody happy that they're a true and correct record? Yeah. Like to propose yet? Second, yeah. I'm all happy. Okay. Any matters arising that people want to talk about that we're not already going to talk about today? I think most of it was the work plan, which is exactly what we're here for. So we have presumably no request to speak to the meeting. No. Any declarations of interest that are not on the website? No. There shouldn't be. Splendid. So item 5, scrutiny work plan planning. And if I ask Mr. Smith to introduce, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Chair. In bringing forward potential items for the Scrutiny Work Plan 24-25, I'll just provide a bit of background to the Management Board. So the Management Board has overall responsibility for the direction and management of scrutiny to ensure that non-executive members are able to make an effective contribution to the improvement and development of the Council, its services and other external public services for the benefit of North Northamptonshire. As part of this responsibility, and why we're here today, is the Scrutiny Management Board is required to develop and approve an annual scrutiny work plan. So the work that's been undertaken to date will help us in finalising the work plan for 24-25. We were originally going to hold a separate workshop, which was agreed at the last meeting. However, the general election had delayed preparations for that by a number of weeks, and it was agreed with the chairs that rather than delay any further, that we would agree the work plan at this meeting. So before we begin, I would just set out a couple of markers that we should, in forming the work plan, we should be promoting effective and focused scrutiny. That 2019 statutory guidance sets out that effective work planning should be built on targeted, incisive and timely work on issues of local importance where scrutiny can add value. We would strongly encourage that there be no more than 3 detailed items on any one committee agenda in order to promote effective and focused scrutiny, and that scrutiny need not and should not receive every executive item on its own forward plan for pre-scrutiny, but that we should be selective of those executive items where we consider there is added value in considering them. Kunwar, would you like to add anything further?
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. I think just to add, in developing this plan, one of the key responsibilities for the committee is to also ensure that they're holding the executive to account and being a critical friend in a collaborative manner. So that, having said that, you have a skeleton or potential items list, which a lot of significant work have gone into developing, bringing to this stage, and with the aid of the executive forward plan available to you, I would very much like your consideration and approval, bearing in mind it's a living document in any case, but we do need some idea as to how many items are coming so we can liaise with the executive directors and senior officers in advance and prepare the committee for any key lines of inquiry in advance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have three scrutiny committees to populate their work programmes: corporate scrutiny, place and environment, and health. So the first thing I think we'll do is look at the executive forward plan, because that will inform, and of course the timing is important there to make sure that we look at things before the executive meets. But we have to recognise that some things can move. Sometimes executive papers are delayed for one reason or another. So we have an internal forward plan ahead of us, and I'll go through that page by page and see. Sorry, yep, got one here for you. And on the right, there's the potential dates for each of these items. Obviously, the meeting on the 15th of August, it's too late now to plan anything for that. So we're looking for the 12th of September onwards. And I think the first thing we've identified that we might want to look at was the Greenway strategy, subject to it having not already been looked at. And then if we go to page 4 of the document, there was interest in the antisocial behaviour policy. There's surplus asset disposal, the tree planting strategy, and we need to approach relevant officers to assess exactly what's involved in some of these. There was interest in the ERP goal, but I think that was just a movement of contracts, that may not be necessary. And the Chelveston Operating Centre on page 5. And then on page 6, I'm not sure where this will fit in. It might fit into the budget, but the HRA final budget was something of interest. And obviously, we'll have all the corporate the scrutiny of the budget. That's separate. And there were some items that are not scheduled, which are listed separately, that we can't place at the moment. But there's a separate list if you look at page 7 of items that are as yet unknown. But most of those may be of interest. Okay, are there any other items from the forward plan that we want to add? Particularly Councillor Buckingham, who hasn't only just seen the document.
For me, it's going to be the housing compliance and fire safety, which is on page 5. It's September, so it may not be possible.
So those are policies for exactly that, and they presumably go to place, do they?
Yes, that would be place and environment scrutiny.
Okay, so that would have to be the August one. Otherwise it would miss. Unless, when's the next corporate scrutiny?
To come to corporate scrutiny, then surplus asset disposals.
Well, yeah, we got that one.
Yep.
When's the next corporate scrutiny?
Sorry, Chairman, we need to rearrange the date of that meeting, and it's likely to be the 12th of September, subject to confirmation from external parties that they can attend.
Well, that would be no good because that would be after, because evening meetings, that would be after the exec. So,
Yeah.
if we're to do it, it would have to go. Would have to be added to the place if that were, which I'm happy to do if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll add that one too. I don't know how lengthy a document it is. Any others?
Obviously, we'd like the ICT report to come.
Yeah, we've got the working parties as well to consider.
Is it all set now?
How are we doing with that working party?
We've made contact with the working party group members to advise them that the group's going to be set up and the meeting will be held shortly.
Chair,
Yeah, come on.
if I may add, Chair, I think my understanding as well is we probably do need 2 more members for that review group, because I think there were 6 and 1 dropped out, so I think we've got 5, so we need 7, I believe.
Yeah, we need 2 nominated Conservative members.
Okay, and this is for the ICT group.
Yes.
Is that the one you've written to me about?
Chair, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realise that was the ICT. I thought it was some scrutiny review. Right, okay. Okay.
It is a scrutiny review.
Yeah, but I didn't realise it was ICT focused. Okay, so we'll get you 2 names for that promptly.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So then we'll move, if we're all content with that, we'll move on to the potential items. They're listed in your papers on page 9. And I'll start with corporate scrutiny. Obviously, a lot of them are recurring.
Yeah.
Have you got other things to add in there, or is that?
I think it's figuring out a number of briefings that we want. So although I would like to move up things like the local ombudsman complaints, because that's now been released and in the public domain, just having a briefing or being able to send out that report to the committee before it comes back in February would be useful.
So we've got 3 options. We can do a written briefing. We can do a Teams briefing to all councillors so that they got the opportunity to ask questions, or we can have a presentation at a meeting. Which one do you?
Louise is
Yes, thank you, Chair. You've got it down at the moment for the 11th of February.
That's
but
right.
we have been asked if we can bring that forward to possibly the October meeting.
okay.
As you say, it's now been released and it's going through the governance process.
But yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I noticed we've also got the report of the ICT panel there. So.
Yes, and hopefully that will be finished because we then start going into budget scrutiny. So, yep, we've discussed that one.
And we've got all the budget scrutiny sessions, phase 1 and phase 2. Though I understand Mrs. Edwards wants to make a change in one of them, or one of the sessions, but the actual scrutiny paper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think the actual scrutiny sessions themselves are fine. It's whether in the actual main budget scrutiny session on the 8th of January, it's whether, because it's got budget scrutiny referred to in there, and it's obviously they're going to happen in all these separate sessions, with the final concluding session on the 21st of January from all the activity that's happened in those sessions, which will include your HRA. Will be in there in terms of housing.
Okay, brilliant.
Right,
Thank you.
So there are 2 points that have been raised previously. The first of which is who can attend the budget scrutiny session. I mean, previous authorities, it's been anybody's been able to go. So the bit of open house. Not everybody turned up, of course, but members of other committees were allowed to attend and speak. And now it's in your gift, obviously. But if that's something we want to do, then we need to tell councillors.
So the agreed terms of reference for budget scrutiny, so any councillors can attend, but it's on a non-speaking capacity.
I think that's, councillors have got expertise and knowledge that should be available to the committee. I don't think it should be it should be at the chairman's invitation to speak, but I don't see why we have a bar on speaking.
I would prefer there to be a speaking element, because I believe there is a lot of expertise within the wider councillors, and to be able to get their input, I think is really important. Just as you would have a session like Parliament where, people can come and give witness statements, I think is part, for me, a big part of what scrutiny is about. It's about looking outside, as well as looking outside a group to get a wider input. So I would prefer it as a chair, as I said to you last year. If we could do that, I would be grateful.
I mean, I think as chairman, you're allowed to allow people to speak. Hopefully that can. But the other thing that's not there is anything about access for the public, any public meetings, any presentations to the public, and I feel. And it's been a failing for a long time, but I feel it is a failing that to rely on online and forms in libraries and so on. It just isn't sufficient to me. I don't know how we plan that in.
I think an issue there is that scrutiny is a budget consultee. It isn't the way in which the authority engages with the public in terms of the budget each year is an executive matter rather than scrutiny.
But, I look back to previous authorities and it was scrutiny that did it by and large. But have we any sign that executive actually do plan to have availability for the public to come in and talk to them?
We can check on that for you.
Yeah, because if not, it should be a recommendation that there is. Sorry, Mrs. Edwards.
As the lead, obviously, on producing the budget for the council, I think we probably need to review exactly what we want to do and how we want to engage them, because obviously we have built in a public budget scrutiny process that we're obliged to offer, which is like you say, it is the online version, and obviously trying to ensure we can engage and communicate through that as through much more wider channels that I know Guy's team have been working on last year. But the problem we also have is we have very tight deadlines in order to achieve this, and I'm conscious, whilst we obviously want to have scrutiny and embrace that, we need to ensure that it's done in a measured way, that it doesn't then become something that we can't manage and a vehicle that just stops the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen instances where council went out and did a presentation, in the offices, in the chamber or whatever, to people to come. I've also found that where scrutiny had sessions that were open, the people that came from organisations, charities, voluntary sector, and other interested parties brought a lot of information, a lot of knowledge and a lot of input, and often alerted you to things that were in the budget that you wouldn't otherwise have known the impact of. So they have I've seen them be very useful in the past, but you know, having people able to come into session. So that's one thing. Yeah, Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you. And rather than maybe the general public and doing it that way and getting it out, so if I give you an example, the council has a tenant action panel which looks at all things to do with landlord. If they were given an invite and say you've got 15 minutes to speak, or, you know, it would give us an insight into other areas where, you know, there is an impact both on the budget and for me it's always been about balancing the budget in terms of both services and managing the money. So it's getting different views on how those services are that people receive. I know that it's not probably right, but I know it might take a little bit of management, but surely we can open up to certain areas of the public to actually come in, as you said, charities that maybe get grants or, you know, that are involved in the community side. So each area has one or two people that they might like to invite and say, come along and give us your views. I know it will probably end up like a pitch to get more funding, but it's not. It's more of, you know, what impact would this have on our public, and would that change our mind on some of the things and pressures that we've got within our budgets? Thank you.
Okay, and the other thing that always bugs me, and one of our independent councillors always mentioned it, is that we get this list of savings and this list of pressures, but we never look at the things that aren't on the list, that aren't there, the things that we're spending and have just been left in the, you know, to carry on as normal. And some of those things, you know, deserve to be looked at, but that's that would be a whole additional workload. Okay. So with those, noting those things, sorry.
Chair, sorry, I didn't want to.
Guy, yeah.
I do apologise. I didn't want to prolong the debate. I don't want to detract from anything that's been said, because I think they're really important points about that kind of that engagement and consultation. I suppose just sort of going on the point that Claire was making, that I think the important point to point out is there is quite a lot of activity that does take place. So the example of the housing tenants, the budget consultation will reach out to a number of stakeholders. Absolutely take on board the point. I think what members are talking about is something that's a little bit more in person, a bit more engaging rather than a form. And I think one of the key things to keep into account is it does also depend on the scope and the nature of the budget proposals that are being discussed. Because if there are particular user groups that are being impacted, then it will be important that more consultation activity is being done. So it does depend on what's driving the budget as well. So I think a flexible approach. But that's certainly some feedback we'll take back into it. I think the only thing to say is the external auditor does also look at the approach that we adopt and look at it in comparison to what other authorities did. And the key feedback from that was really what can we do to just to increase the participation in budget consultation responses, which are really quite difficult, as you can imagine, to get responses on, because it is seen as a technical area. And I think Councillor Buckingham's sort of suggestions do make it a little bit more personable, but I think it does really depend on the kind of issues. Where I've seen it work well before is things like business rates and business breakfasts and those type of things, where you can get a particular kind of group. What I am conscious of is the scale as well of the unitary authority to do that more in-person type element, to get it representative across the area. It obviously scales up. So I think, you know, those sort of budget issues that are coming through the system it's really sort of focusing on what consultation we do to reflect those budget proposals. We'll certainly take that on board, though, and welcome a discussion offline if members want to probe that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable distance away, and something we need to work on. Okay. Anything else on corporate scrutiny? No? All happy? Okay, health scrutiny. Which the next meeting is the 10th of September. Councillor Owl.
Thank you, Chair. So on the next meeting, we have coming to health scrutiny, children's health checks, which is otherwise known as young people's mental health, the performance of Kettering General Hospital, and I've spoken that at length before, why it's needed. There's been uncertainty around the build now, given the change of government. And finally, if possible, the quality report from KGH as well, as we'll have the same representatives coming from Kettering General Hospital. So that should be sufficient enough for the 10th of September. That's I mentioned about the November meeting. I believe we're bringing in 0 to 19 services and health protection, GP performance, and with patient flow briefing. We discussed this briefly, but with patient flow, I'd like to see, because it all lumps together with emission avoidance and falls prevention. But that could be a separate piece for the ambulance to come and talk about. And I'd like to know what the council's doing around, or the NHS is doing around hospital at home and virtual wards, which are seen to be supporting bed blocking issues in other areas of the UK. So that could be something to have as a briefing, and to see if members want to discuss that at length at full scrutiny. But that's the November agenda. Do you want me to go on?
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
So on the January agenda, we said, looking to bring in dementia, health and wellbeing strategy, and another item, I believe, on the January.
Yeah, that was also the school exclusions.
Exclusions, yes, exclusions, which I'd like to see homeschooling and virtual schooling on that as well. And in the March meeting that we have for health scrutiny, we mentioned about VAT on private schools, which is lumped in with sufficiency and impact on increased school sizes because of that new policy and taxation on education. That's what I've got so far. Thank you.
Okay, so you've got a reasonable programme lined up. Okay. Did you want to comment? Yeah.
I think as well we talked about family hubs as being on for a future item, and we have also got potentially disabled facilities grants.
Not sure where we'll squeeze that in, but in terms of family hubs, that is an important topic that could be squeezed into the January.
We had family hubs down for the March meeting.
For the March meeting,
yeah.
Okay. So we've got 3 items for the March meeting then so far. And how many items for January so far?
For January, we have 2.
2, right. I would like to ask a question, actually, if possible, Chair, around social media. Where does that fit in terms of scrutinising that around child sexual exploitation and grooming? That's something I'd like to see come into scrutiny, but not sure where that will sit. That sit in my committee, or does that sit in place?
It sounds more like a health, and because it's children, which is education you've got as well. So,
well, I'd like to see that come to one of the meetings, particularly social media, but specifically around CSE and grooming of children and how social media impacts that. I had a few conversations with, I can't remember the names of them now, but this was in my first term, and they were really painting quite a vivid picture on how Snapchat enables grooming of children, young children as young as 8, and how social media can also impact the lives of around child sexual exploitation. So it'll be good to have that coming to probably the January meeting if it's quite short, potentially a briefing if we can't actually put together a policy pack. Thank you.
Okay. All happy with that? One thing going back, I think Councillor Buckingham wanted to potentially have a session on the housing revenue account in the budget, as long as we've got that noted. Yeah.
Claire did say that there would be a separate session for housing and, yes, in the budget scrutiny.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the sessions that we have set up includes adult health partnerships and housing. So housing will be part and parcel of those scrutiny sessions, which is the HR.
No, it was going to be I'd asked for a separate session because the adult social care.
We can split them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can split them.
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted that to be captured for the, for the minutes.
Thank you.
That was all. Chair, Councillor
Missed out one item. It seems that we've got a number of items now coming to health scrutiny, but the ICB overspend that was referenced, their financial plan. And I sort of recall from the last meeting them saying they wasn't able to give us any information because they hadn't concluded the budgets. Would we know when they conclude the budgets to see when that can be brought forward for that to be scrutinised?
Through you, Chair, I can follow that up, Councillor Lawal, and see when that will be available.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us on to place and environment. So we've got first meeting on 27th of August. We've got two items on bereavement and potentially surplus assets, and now we've just added in the housing compliance and fire safety for that one, so that's fine. Then in October, highways inspection and asset management plan and private sector housing assistance policy. And we've got a number of other items that are suggested, and as of yet we haven't got dates from the relevant officers, so we can't slot them in as yet, but they would include update on traffic enforcement measures introduced last year, so if you like an annual report on that, stock condition survey report, which is something that's coming anyway, a report on the Chelveston Energy Park, and I think that there is a report going to exec, so we need to time alongside that. Perhaps a report on how we've had a considerable amount of money from the government on highways repairs and how that's being spent would be, I'm sure, of interest to know. Asset rationalisation scrutiny group, so that we need to have on the August agenda for the revised membership for that to be agreed and for that to restart its work with a slightly different remit, so we'll need some slightly different terms of reference. And Councillor Buckingham has asked for a report on private sector housing and new regulations, and unadopted roads, of which there are many long-standing, and I know of several that are a big issue. So those will be scheduled in, if possible. Have we got any other items that people would of interest in that area? Go on, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thinking it may be worth having a look at the decision of Kettering Library and the roof and the spend and the decisions that were made around that particular decision.
So Cornerstone and
yes, yeah. I certainly would have some questions to raise during any scrutiny, and it is a hot topic, so to speak. So I think that should potentially be considered.
Yeah. Is that that's one of those cross-cutting ones that's a building, therefore it's part of assets, but it's also operationally a community, and so it's one of those cross-cutting ones. And where would that preferentially go, Mr. Smith, do you think?
Claire would like to come in.
Through you, Chair. So the activity in terms of spend would be reported through the quarterly reporting that you would receive through capital outturn through corporate scrutiny. It's whether there's anything on the basis of what you see in those reports that the questions then could be fielded there, or whether you want a separate briefing on the activity for that capital programme.
We do get written briefings occasionally on the progress of the scheme, but you know, I think you're looking at going more depth possibly. And I know that officers have been and looked at the mine recently, so, just to assure themselves that there's still tiles down there. But I'm not sure where that would best fit. But we can find out where it would best fit and include it in the potentials. Perhaps give officers a bit more detail of what exactly your involvement is, and that will help to guide them. Or not your involvement, but your interest.
I think getting some, we can get some internal feedback from officers about sort of milestones and when it may be, you know, appropriate and timely for you to look at it more in depth. So I think, yeah, we'll get you that briefing in the first instance, and then arising from that, Jane just wants to come in.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, can I ask, are you talking about the whole of the Kettering Library, all of that estate with the cornerstone, or something just specifically the library?
Well, I had in mind in particular the roof and the cost of the roof and the decisions behind that, in particular the Collie Weston and the use of that, and if there was potentially any alternatives considered.
There is a report. So there has been a report that was published recently about the progress of the project against the timescales that we could provide, because it is on the timescales that it should be on, and there is a number of reports around that. So if I can send those to you, and if there are questions, we could look at where that would sit.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you. Any other items, Mr. Smith?
Chair, if I may, could I just ask if there's any further indication around the scope of what was required around the review of private sector housing regulations, because I'm not clear about what the focus of any scrutiny might be around that, so some further direction might be helpful there. Thank you.
Which item is this? The item?
It was one of the suggested items that came from Chair's briefing, said a report on private sector housing and new regulations.
New regulations, that one. So that came from Councillor Buckingham, so.
Sorry, the new regulations are around social housing, and how that works out rather than the new regulations for private sector.
Is that what you wanted to know?
Okay, I think we just need to then reframe what that item's about then, because it's clearly not directed at private sector housing, it's directed around public sector housing, and we just need to discuss, you know, I guess, how we scope that in terms of what that piece of work looks like with Yvonne, I guess, going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to have a conversation offline about directing that more appropriately? Okay. Anything else to sum up, Mr. Smith? Any items we've not covered?
I don't think so. I think our job now is to go through and provide you with a revised list, and we can through you, Chair, with the three chairs, if you can sort of offline approve the revised list as per our discussions this evening, we can then release the work programme to all members of Scrutiny and to corporate leadership team, so that everyone can start planning ahead in terms of the items and things like key lines of inquiry that can work with officers in developing, and members, of course. So officers and members and officers, will go members first. But other than that, I think, unless Kumar, you've got anything further to add, I think that's probably it for this evening.
No, I'm happy that there are a lot of items we haven't been able to fully bed down, but because of uncertainties that out with this committee. So I'm quite happy that we go away and do our best efforts and agree offline between the individual committee chairman that, and the vice chairman presumably. They're more precise work plans, and which still may change because of papers being changed, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I suppose I should add, and Kumar had said this earlier as well, it will remain a living document throughout the year, and I suppose it will be for chairs and vice chairs and sort of leading officers in the particular areas to sort of develop in more detail the themes that they would like to be brought forward in the reports at each meeting. So, to make sure that we've got that effective and focused scrutiny and the adding value element.
I think the other thing we ought to take our time is think about whether the system is right, whether it works to the best, because we would have to ask Democracy and Standards to look at the Constitution if we needed to refine how this went about. But that's something we need to think about, and we need to make a recommendation to them. And I think chairman should just consider that over the year.
Yeah, I think within the scrutiny procedure rules, I think you as a scrutiny management board have I think a pretty wide latitude in terms of how you would like scrutiny to be run over the course of the year. I think there's a couple of restrictions, for instance, in terms of the number of scrutiny review panels that can operate at any one time. There's our sort of unwritten rule ask that you don't scrutinise more than 3 detailed items at any one meetings. I think you've sneaked in a couple here and there to increase to 4, but I think we can manage that. But where you have sneaked one here and there into a 4, we certainly can't make it a 5.
No, I mean, things like the number of panels, I mean, could it be that each committee is able to cope with more panels, particularly if one of member can go away and do an investigation? For instance, he's got a particular skill, expertise that he might want to go away, and it might be useful for him to be able to do that. So, but those are things we need to think about and come back to later.
Yeah, certainly there's a variety of ways in which we can operate scrutiny reviews. There's the sort of traditional, sort of more longer term review, which maybe take 4, 5, 6 months. There's spotlight reviews where you can arrange to bring representatives in and spend an intensive day progressing through. As the chair just said, you can have an individual member providing an investigation and come back, and it may be that you then want to develop that further, or you're satisfied that that piece of work is quite conclusive.
Okay. With that thought, if nobody else has got anything, I will declare the meeting closed at 7:45 or just before. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for those.